Hello everyone, welcome to FedScoop TV. My name is Greg Otto and we're here at Fed Talks 2016 and I'm talking with Brian Dye, who leads engineering for Intel Security. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
So Brian, tell me, how do you think the game has changed when it comes to federal IT in 2016, and has anything surprised you along the way?
You know, I think the two big game changers for this year, clearly the National Cyber Action Plan has been a big one. It's really raised the perspective from the policymaking standpoint. But the other one that really helps us is how relevant cyber has been to the actual current election cycle with the DNC hacks, kind of getting into the topic of attribution. It's really helping raise the awareness and raise the priority across the field. What I would say is it hasn't been surprising, because for me, the engagement of cyber in the election cycle was a when, not an if.
Okay. So cybersecurity, we've seen an emphasis with the National Action Plan that you were talking about, and the federal government just hired their first Chief Information Security Officer. How do you see industry supporting this, and how do you see industry helping the federal government carry out their cybersecurity priorities?
You know, I think one of the biggest things that we can do from an industry perspective is to drive forward a lot of the threat intelligence sharing that has to happen.
Okay.
This has been a big initiative in cyber for 15 or 20 years. That part isn't actually new. But being able to do it effectively is something we're only really learning how to do now, and being able to take advantage of a lot of the policy work so we can do that jointly with the government, not just across technology vendors. I think that's one big area. The second big area, I think, is as we get better at cyber, one of the things that everyone is having to stare in the face is that one of the biggest problems in cyber is simply being out of date on the technology. Because there is a people and a process problem, but the biggest technology problem is simply being out of date. So what I think we're entering into for the whole industry is a period, and these tend to happen every 5 to 7 years, where the tool sets themselves become truly consolidated. And I feel like we're entering one of those waves, and that will make it easier to kind of leapfrog to current, which I think is one of the bigger problems behind the National Action Plan.
Okay, so you talked about being out of date, and a big thing with the government is IT modernization.
Yes.
Whether it's public sector, private sector, where do you think the easy points are for enterprises that are looking to upgrade their cybersecurity? Where can they inject money and have a good stance in 12 or 18 months of work?
You know, what's great about that question is the answer is going to be different for every organization.
Okay.
I think you've got to start with a risk-based understanding of where your problems are, look at where your spend is out of line, but really that starts with driving towards an outcome. And I think this is actually something that the industry has a problem with, technology vendors have a problem with, because we're in this habit of new threat, new widget, new threat, new widget. And the problem with that is you wind up with a whole bunch of widgets and you have no idea if you're more secure or not. So I think for organizations, they need to understand what their actual outcomes are, being able to tie their vulnerabilities and their risks to those outcomes. And then that will drive them towards what kind of sets of solutions, not individual technologies, but solutions they need to go implement that will change the outcomes. I think that's the biggest thing that both the defenders and the technology industry can do together, is stop having a widget discussion and start having an outcome discussion.
So we talked a little bit about what the federal government is doing internally, but what can the federal government do to help the private sector sort of raise the bar when it comes to cybersecurity? I know we talked about it a little bit, but I'd like to go a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, a little deeper on that one. So I think the biggest, some of the new policies being introduced are great to reduce the risk of things like information sharing. But a lot of what has to get done has to be, from a federal government standpoint, has to be around incentives, not around compliance.
Okay.
So I think helping folks understand that being compliant and being secure are not the same things, and making sure that we focus our policies on the incentives for security, not simply penalties for compliance, is probably the biggest thing from a policy perspective. Because I've talked to far too many organizations to say, well, I've got my PCI certification. Great. That helps you check a box. It doesn't mean that you're more secure.
Right. Well, Brian, appreciate your insights. Thanks for stopping by today.
Thanks, Greg.
For all of our videos, check out our YouTube channel, and for more information, check out fedscoop.com. I'm Greg Otto. Thanks for watching.